Let's go ahead and begin. We have up the birds of prey of the Southwestern United States, and we're really going to focus today on better understanding where these birds fit into this ecosystem that we call the Southwest, with a lot of emphasis on shape and structure. So, how these birds appear as a form flying around, in particular, birding by by assessing a bird's structure and its shape, its general size is a skill that can be developed over time. I still feel like I'm getting the swing of it with all types of birds, but especially with birds of prey, it can be especially helpful because sometimes these birds are really far away. They might have different styles or manners of flying depending on the conditions or what that bird's intentions are. And so we kind of approach this with what we call the raptor mindset. But let's agree upon what the Southwest is. I'm from Florida originally. I come from Miami. And when I first got out to the West, I was thinking of places like Phoenix, Arizona. I'm thinking of like dry desert, saguaro cactus. But of course, if you spend a lot of time in the Southwest, you know that it's characterized by a lot more than just desert. Within that desert, you have canyons, you may have grasslands in some places. You have isolated mountain ranges, quite a few of them. Nevada has well over 300 and they're great places to look for birds of prey. We also have river corridors such as the Rio Grande or the Colorado River. And of course, all throughout these landscapes in the Southwest, elevation and aridity play huge roles. And so this area we're looking at today is going to be Arizona, southern Utah, southern Nevada, New Mexico, West Texas. And you could probably finesse or finagle the limits of the Southwest a little bit, depending on who you ask. Culturally, it has an identity as well. Geographically, it might be a little malleable. When I think of it, I think of it's excluding the Great Basin region. So, like Reno or Salt Lake City, I don't really consider them the Southwest, but people there might. So we're really looking at the Chihuahuan Desert, the Sonoran Desert, and the Mojave Desert, and particularly not so much the Great Basin Desert. And those are our four North American deserts, or the ones that we find in the United States. There is of course, the Baja California Desert, which is now separate from the Sonoran. The Southwest also has a high amount of bird of prey diversity, not just in hawks and falcons, but also with many of our owls. You get down to Southeast Arizona, you start to get whiskered screech owls, you get spotted owl, you get gray hawk and common black hawk. But we're going to mostly be focusing on those diurnal birds today. But Southeast Arizona is a great place to see them all. During the course of this presentation tonight, we're going to go over just a couple topics, but really expand on a few of them, and that's going to be the bird ID part. So we'll talk a little bit about what makes a bird of prey a bird of prey. We'll get into what I call the raptor mindset, this way of approaching bird identification, especially diurnal birds of prey. We'll break into the major raptor groups, or at least most of them. And as we do that, we'll be looking more at certain species. So we'll go through some species profiles and then, of course, talk a little bit about how to apply those things. But what makes a bird of prey a bird of prey? Well, it usually has a couple different things in common with other species of birds of prey. And we have eagles, we have owls, we have hawks, we have harriers, we have kites, and we have falcons. All of these birds are sharing at least some of these traits, and they may include strong legs and long curved claws that are great for grabbing prey and seizing and holding on to prey. Sometimes we call these birds collectively raptors, but owls aren't that related to falcons, and falcons aren't that related to the hawks and eagles. So it really is coming down to convergent evolution for a lot of these birds to share these traits, but they're not actually closely related, some of these groups of birds. But they all are sharing, again, those strong legs and long curved claws. They also have hooked beaks that are great for tearing flesh, exceptional eyesight, and they will play the role as predator and or scavenger. Most of them are simply just predators, but bald and golden eagles, they will scavenge. Caracaras will scavenge. Some of the bootios will scavenge. But some of them are not going to do any scavenging. They're only going to catch prey that they actually, or eat prey that they actually just captured that was living right before they caught it and killed it, of course. And for you, the things that I hope you take away from this are just a couple new tools for your ID tool belt. Familiarity using these tools, so knowing when they're appropriate to use. Hawk watching is a skill, and we talk a little bit about how to view or approach hawk ID or hawk watching. And when we say hawk watching, we're also including kites and falcons in that, even though they're not all technically hawks. We'll be getting more comfortable with uncertainty. Not every bird can be identified, and we have to live with that. Doesn't matter how experienced you are. And of course, the better we understand these birds, sometimes it gives us more joy. And we can grow more confident as we are paying more attention to the natural world. But I will always come back to, and say that we don't have to know the names of these birds to really enjoy them. They're out there in nature, just simply being out in nature and connecting to it in some way, paying attention is a great start. And you could kind of end there. Also, use the chat. Give me your questions on birding, field work, and hawkwatch sites as we go along. And we won't be covering kites or any owls. We don't really have kites in the Southwest. There are some Mississippi kites in some places in New Mexico and Colorado, but we don't have swallowtail kites here. White-tailed kites are showing up every now and then from populations in California and Mexico, but we just don't see enough of them to really talk about them at length here. Maybe for another webinar at a different time, there'll be a part two. And let me begin a little bit about talking about why I became so passionate about birds of prey. I was a birder from a very young age, and I, of course, like everyone, loved birds of prey. And it wasn't until I got a field job in the Florida Keys when I was, this would have been about 11 years ago. This was in 2014 in the fall, so actually coming up on 12. And I was able to be a hawk counter in the Florida Keys in the fall. So going from September to the end of October. And we worked, each one of us, there are four of us that were full-time doing this. We worked 6 days a week. We would start before sunrise, counting songbirds and all passerines moving through the Keys on their way to Cuba or the Yucatan. And then when the conditions were right around mid-morning, we would begin looking at for birds of prey, and we would literally count them all day long. If they were moving southbound, we would tally them. If they looked like they were feeding in the area and going north, we would not tally those birds. And so we were in the Florida Keys, which sort of serve as a bottleneck along the eastern seaboard. And in the fall, you have falcons, hawks, some kites, eagles, lots of vultures, and falcons moving south. And for those that are migrating outside of the eastern United States and Canada, their options are to cross water somewhere or go around the Gulf and into Mexico and down that way. Most broad-winged hawks and turkey vultures do that, and you have really amazing places like Veracruz that you can go witness big spectacles of migratory birds of prey. But you can also see a little bit of that in the Keys. And for any of the birds that are comfortable crossing water as they migrate, they're going to funnel down the Keys, and we were positioned at this strategic place to actually observe them. We were led by this guy named Rafael Galvez. You can see him in that right photo. He's an amazing mentor and illustrator, and also helped to manage and bring money into this hawk watch because he's very passionate about it. He recognized that there's a lot of unknowns about migration in the Florida Keys and how we could actually assess the recovery of some birds of prey by monitoring them as they go through the Florida Keys. And so this has been going on for over 20 years. And when I was there in 2014, we were able to observe these species that you can see on the left. We saw all of them except for a white-tailed kite. And then the totals from that year are on the right-hand side. So this is a really important place for a couple species, including ospreys and peregrine falcons, merlins, and so on. And so because the peregrine falcon was nearly extinct just a couple decades ago following the proliferation of a pesticide called DDT, which really harmed a lot of birds of prey. There had been certain efforts to monitor their recovery. This is a great way to do it. And we actually were able to observe 4,216 peregrine falcons over the course of 2 months that year. I think that in years after that, people were spotting even more peregrine falcons moving through. Our biggest day in 2014, we had 364 peregrine falcons, all southbound. And so I saw a lot of birds of prey. And when I first got there, when I first showed up, I thought I knew birds of prey really well. I thought that I was a hot shot or at least I thought I was. And I showed up thinking that I could identify any sharp-shinned or Cooper's hawk from a distance, and I was humbled very quickly. What I learned is that this is a whole new skill, and picking out these birds from a distance when they may be hundreds or thousands of feet up, and identifying based off of a silhouette or just a couple distinctive ways that they fly was really the skill for me to learn. And I didn't walk away from this 2 months afterwards completely able to do that. You know, I still have to sometimes call a sharp-shinned or a Cooper's hawk just a unknown hawk or species still to this day. But it was a great way to learn a little bit about the methods of hawk watching. And so I learned a little bit more about what we call the Raptor mindset from other experienced hawk watchers that came through. And they really talked about how we build identification through a series of clues, which is not really all that different from all birding, but it's with a higher emphasis on your shape and proportions, and then a little emphasis on your color tone and pattern, a lot of emphasis on your movement and behavior, as well as the flight style and wing beat rhythm. Um, I say it's slightly emphasized here in this presentation because when I'm showing you photos of birds, things are very static. You don't really get a feel for how they're flying around, but I do make some notes of that. What you see in bold there, shape and proportions or color tone and pattern, they're bolded because in this presentation, we're able to emphasize them a little bit more. But all of them are important. Of course, if the bird is calling or making a sound, that's really helpful too. But most of the time, especially at hawk watches, we're not hearing these birds vocalize, so it's not really a great clue. And color is really helpful, but sometimes it can be a little misleading, and we'll talk a little bit or a lot about that stuff. But basically, Raptor mindset is synthesizing multiple hints and clues into an ID, and uncertainty and humility are a part of the process. And it's important to keep in mind when going out and observing birds of prey, especially in a place like the Southwest, that many of our species are going to have very broad or limited ranges. Something like a red-tailed hawk has a very broad range. You can find them in a variety of different habitats across the Southwest at all times of year. But you might have something like that immature common blackhawk on the left, which is only going to be found along some of the riparian areas, especially closer to Arizona. Um, those common blackhawks really rely on those like cottonwood gallery forest, riparian areas, wetlands with lots of large trees for sitting and nesting. But red-tailed hawks, of course, they can be found in many different habitats. There are, of course, different times that these birds could be present or absent. So right now, we're starting to see some of our Swainson's hawks return from Argentina and South America. And in the wintertime, they will be completely gone, but we may start to get more rough-legged hawks or ferruginous hawks in the area. And then remember that some of these birds have specialties, and some of them may have more general strategies for surviving and making a way through the world. And here are some of our shapes. We're going to cover all of these birds, and a lot of them are in different shapes. These are all birds that I took photos of, and I found a way to edit out all the color so you just get the silhouette. And that's going to be our big emphasis today is really looking at the shapes of these birds as we go. So let's get into some of those species profiles. But we have to start with the turkey vulture because this is one of the most likely birds that you're going to run into out there. Not technically a bird of prey, although they are a scavenger and they are soaring. They're bird of prey sized. They're larger than a red-tailed hawk. You could even confuse them with a golden eagle under some circumstances, just because they're large, dark, and have that V shape like a golden eagle does, that dihedral. They have this featherless head that gives the bird a very small-headed appearance. Sometimes that is able to be seen. And they're going to have these silvery wing feathers, but contrasting with the black body to give them this two-toned look. Turkey vultures are starting to make their way back into the West. They might overwinter in places like Phoenix and Tucson, but they're really starting to move through right now. Scavengers, not related to hawks or falcons, but have a lot of similarities and serve a really important role as a scavenger, which of course some of these other birds of prey do. But let's spend a little bit more time on the bootios. The bootios are large, usually broad-winged and medium to short-tailed birds of prey, at least compared to some of the other ones like goshawks and sharp-shinned hawks and harriers. And notice here the breadth of shapes of these birds and how they position their wings. You might notice that some of them look maybe longer and thinner winged. Some of them look like they have almost fingers coming out of the ends of their wings. Those are the primary feathers making those silhouettes. And we will look at four bootios at length. And we got to start with this bird. Really get to know this bird. If you're new to hawk watching, this is the bird to start with. And if you're an experienced hawk watcher, you know that red-tailed hawks are a extremely variable species of bird. They're extremely widespread. You can find them throughout in places like the West Indies. You can find them all across the lower 48, every Canadian province. You get them in Alaska, and they get down well into Mexico, potentially even Central America. I'm not sure. And these are pretty big, hefty bootios. Only the adults have those red tails, and they kind of appear to be like the bodybuilders of the birds of prey. And if you look at that photo on the right, especially, I think that really tells us a lot about how big those inner wings are. They actually overlap with the base of the tail. That's how big and broad they are. They're kind of like the bodybuilders that are always working on bicep day and they really bulge out over the tail. And when we look at some of those other bootios, you're going to notice that the inner wings of these hawks don't overlap with the tail as much. They look a lot slimmer and sleeker. So I'm really looking at the body shape when I'm looking at all birds of prey, but especially with red-tailed hawks. And when I see a bird of prey in the West, usually what I'm assuming is this is a red-tailed hawk, but I'm going to look for the reasons why it's not a red-tailed hawk. That's just how abundant and expected they are across most habitats across most of the year. Now, regardless of the color morph or the age, there are a couple things that you can look for that are dead ringers for red-tailed hawk. And if you look at the left bird, there's a young red-tailed hawk there, but you'll notice it has this belly band. It's this dark streaking of feathers along the belly. Almost all red-tailed hawks are going to have a noticeable belly band. You can see the center bird there does. The one on the right there does as well. And these are birds that are photographed in Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. So kind of across the Southwest, you get this representation. So you're looking at the bulging inner wings. You're looking at the belly band. And now you're going to look at what we call these wrist commas. Just in the hand of the hawk, you can see these dark markings. All three of these birds have those wrist commas. Some other birds of prey have them, but again, you're collecting a few different puzzle pieces here and using those to get a sense of what you're seeing. And it's the wrist commas combined with the belly band that might tell you, all right, you have a red-tailed hawk. But also look at those dark patagiums, those dark areas around the shoulders. You can see that all three of these birds also have those dark patagiums. And that's going to be, again, those dark feathers along the shoulders. And here are two more red-tailed hawks. The one on the left is from Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge in New Mexico. The one on the right is from the Flagstaff area of Arizona. And even with these two birds, different lighting, different ages, you can still see that the belly bands, the dark patagiums, and those wrist commas are noticeable. But these birds look very different in terms of like other parts of their patterning and their coloration. So those are your red-tailed hawks. Get to know those birds really well. They're going to be like your reference birds for just about every other bird of prey because you're going to see them so frequently. But Swainson's hawks are also coming into the West. I know that up in Alaska at one of the hawk watches northeast of Anchorage, they're already starting to move through there, even though it's still very much wintry in that part of Alaska. These birds overwinter in Argentina and parts of South America in a habitat called the Pampas, which is kind of like grasslands with some scattered trees. And I actually just saw about 120 or so Swainson's hawks flying through Buenos Aires at the end of February. And this was a migratory flock. They're heading back into North America for the breeding season. So this is a very long-winged bird that is able to use those long wings to cover quite a bit of distance. They're long and pointed, and on the right-hand side, you can see that I have that little candle flame next to the wing of that right bird because these birds kind of resemble having this sort of like candle flame-like wing, very different from the red-tailed hawk. You can see they lack those dark patagiums. Um, the you could say maybe the one in the center sort of has a belly band, but again, those patagiums are pretty light and the wings are way thinner. So it's just a sleeker looking bird, these Swainson's hawks. Elsewhere in the grasslands, that's where the Swainson's hawks are breeding. But if you get into the grasslands or like open steppe country, we're talking like open habitat, sometimes agricultural areas, especially in the wintertime, you're going to run into North America's largest hawk. This is the Ferruginous hawk, just a little bit bigger than the red-tailed hawk. And they're much thinner winged. They've got long tapered wings. You can see that on the right-hand side. Those wings don't really bulge over the base of the tail like it did for the red-tailed hawk. They've got these barrel chests. They lack the dark patagiums. They do often have these um, the crescents in the wrists like a red-tailed hawk might, but uh, still quite a different bird. But remember that when it comes to plumage, red-tailed hawks are extremely variable. You can have nearly white red-tailed hawks, especially in the Midwest. You've got the Kreider's red-tailed hawk, and I've seen even some really light ones here that are light morph Harlan's red-tailed hawks in southern Nevada on occasion. They look really white. So color is not the the thing to really look for a lot of the time. It's the pattern and plumage that I would emphasize more than the color when you're looking at a bird's feathers. Moving along, we've got the red-tailed or red-shouldered hawk. And this is not widespread in the Southwest, although they are spreading at a fast rate. This is a bird that mostly is going to be found in flooded or damp forest or forest edge. They like to sit and perch for a very long time, so you do see them soaring to kind of cover their territory, or maybe when they're migrating, they're going to soar or glide for a little bit. But for the most part, these birds are staying put on a territory. They're feeding on slow-moving animals like voles, bullfrogs, snakes, rodents that you can find at the edge of forest or sometimes inside the forest. This is not a bird that you're going to get over open habitat like a Swainson's hawk or a Ferruginous hawk. They're pretty specialized here. If you go out east, or into California, you might run into them a lot more, but out here in the Southwest, they're not that common, but they are spreading. The adults are Halloween themed. They're orange, white, and black, or a dark gray. And they can look a little bit more gangly when they're younger. So they might look a little bit more like a Cooper's hawk actually in their structure when they're young. A lot of these birds of prey, when they're younger, they're going to have longer tails or longer wing feathers. So it makes them look a little bit more gangly. But an adult red-shouldered hawk looks very, they almost look like they have these baseball mitts because of that bulge kind of towards the wrist. And the most diagnostic feature that you can see, uh, sometimes from a considerable distance, on all ages of red-shouldered hawk are these white crescents in the wrist. So that's going to be the wrist. It's the outer wing. It'll be glowing with white, especially on a bright day. And if you're looking straight up at a red-shouldered hawk that's soaring or gliding overhead, you're going to see white passing right through those crescents, those white inner wings of the red-shouldered hawk. And especially when they're adults, they have this alternating black and white pattern on the tail. That's going to be called a terminal band. And the terminal band is a great thing to look for. Some hawks have them, some don't. But again, you're looking at combinations of things to get a sense of what is what. Here is a young red-shouldered hawk from the Las Vegas area. For the Las Vegas birders here, this was over at Floyd Lamb Park. This is a place where they just started breeding in the last few years, and here's one of the young that was born there. These are low perch hunters, again, in forests and wooded wetlands. They also like our parks wherever you're getting a little bit of water around. The water attracts some of their favored prey items. And these birds will also on their backs have quite a bit of white. So even though I could see certain circumstances where you might see a young red-shouldered hawk that's overall very brown, doesn't have a lot of that orange coloration yet. The tail's not that obvious black and white pattern, so you may not know that you're looking at a red-shouldered hawk at first, but they have a lot of white on the back. So it almost looks like they have these flecks or speckles on the back in sort of this like messy pattern. And that can be a great indication that you're probably looking at a young red-shouldered hawk. Now we're going to get into some other hawks. These are considered to be some of the most difficult to identify in the field, so I'm not going to breeze through this stuff. We're going to stop here. And these are our accipiters. And I have a little asterisk there because accipiters for a very long time was used to reference northern goshawk, Cooper's hawk, and sharp-shinned hawk that were all considered to be in the genus of accipiters. However, one of them was removed from that genus. I can't remember which one it is. I think it was the Cooper's hawk. I really should know that, but the point is these birds are not as closely related as we once believed. There's a lot of genetic evidence that's supporting the restructuring of where we fit these animals taxonomically. But right now, they're no longer considered the same genus. And we'll spend a little time with them, the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned in particular. So here on the left, you have a young sharp-shinned hawk. You can see that fairly long neck and that very long tail. All of these birds share that they're very slim with relatively long tails. They're very sleek. And the MO of Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks is to sneak up on birds. Those birds can be perched or they can be in flight. And the way they do that is instead of soaring, maybe like a Swainson's hawk or a Ferruginous hawk would, and diving down on something, they're actually going to pursue things and ambush them, sometimes from a very low elevation. So these are the birds that hang out in your backyard bird feeders and will watch a bird feeder from a couple houses or yards away from a concealed location. They'll spot a target, they'll drop, and then they'll weave using the topography and trees and structures and fences, whatever they have, to be able to hide from their target. And then they pop up and grab usually a bird, although they will take mammals on occasion as well. So they have to have those slim profiles and wings that allow them that maneuverability. So the wings aren't really long on these birds, they're a little bit more compact. These are forest hawks. And even though the photos on the right are a little awkward, the way they got cut off, you have this Cooper's hawk that's pursuing that red-tailed hawk, trying to probably steal that prey. Did not work for that Cooper's hawk that's smaller and lighter, but you can still see on that red-tailed hawk the dark patagium and the breastband and a little bit of the wrist comb is there. So even though it's kind of funky, you can still tell what type of hawk that is if you know what to look for. And you can see that Cooper's hawk is a little bit smaller than that red-tailed. Some things to look for that are dead ringers for Cooper's hawks is this relatively flat head and uh, the the young and the adults, and this is going to be more noticeable in flight, but they'll oftentimes have these white hip patches that kind of look like saddles, and those are going to be pretty absent on other birds of prey, especially sharp-shinned hawks. And one of the keys to look for with Cooper's hawk or sharp-shinned hawk, if you've narrowed it down between those two species, is look at how far beyond the bird's body the head goes. So how far does it project forward? Remember, Cooper's hawks have kind of larger heads and some neck to them, whereas a sharp-shinned hawk is no neck and just a tiny little circular head. It almost looks like a pigeon or a dove head on a small hawk's body. But even at this angle, you can see that that Cooper's hawk head here is projecting beyond the body. Um, the tail on this Cooper's hawk seems a little bit rounded at the end. It's very, very subjective, but um, oftentimes sharp-shinned hawks have a little bit more squared tail. You'll see that in some of the photos coming up, while the Coopers have kind of a more round tail. But that on its own is not reliable enough. These are good indicators. So again, when you're getting these birds in flight, you're looking at a couple things. You're looking to see how far that head extends beyond the bird's body. That's one of the things I'm looking at to differentiate Coopers and Sharp-shinned. And you've got Coopers on the left here, Sharp-shinned on the right. Sharp-shinned hawks, though, sometimes it can be almost unmistakable. This is a bird that is all tail and wings and not a lot of head. So you've got these broad, short, and rounded wings. They just look proportionally small here relative to the size of the body. Each wing, fully extended, is going to be a little bit longer than the bird's body in total. When you're looking at the tail, it is kind of squared there at the base. And it also looks as if the tail is pinched in as it meets the body. It kind of gets compressed in. So I'm looking for that pinched in body that's a little bit more noticeable on male birds, which tend to average a lot smaller than the females. Another thing to look for with sharp-shinned hawks is if you're watching a bird flapping, oftentimes they'll glide and then in between breaks of gliding, they'll flap and they'll flap quite rapidly. If you're having trouble keeping track as you're counting the wing beats, if it's too fast for you to get an accurate count, you're most likely watching a sharp-shinned hawk. If you can count, most likely you're looking at a Cooper's hawk. Um, Perched, these sharp-shinned hawks oftentimes can have this bug-eyed look. Here's a young, or excuse me, a adult male sharp-shinned hawk that I saw in a park near Las Vegas one winter. But they're, again, pretty tough to tell apart. And there are still times where I have to let them go and just call them a sharp-shinned or a Cooper's hawk, but not giving it a definitive answer. And that's completely okay. Um, Quick summary about these two birds, recognizing Cooper's versus Sharp-shinned. The tail shape is a great indicator, but it's not enough. Impression of that head size is a great indicator, but oftentimes isn't enough. But if it looks like that it has a smaller head and the wings are pushed forward like it's shrugging, Well, you probably have a shrugging Sharpie. And if it appears to be a flying mallet, then you probably have a sharp-shinned hawk. But if it looks like a flying cross, that sounds better for Cooper's hawk. And if you live in Tucson, Phoenix, Albuquerque, Las Vegas, St. George, and you have the birds breeding in your neighborhood or in the park, and this is low elevation, you're almost 100% looking at a Cooper's hawk because sharp-shinned hawks mostly migrate out of the region for breeding. And if they do breed in the region, usually it's higher elevation where you get some pines, so like 7, 8, 9,000 feet and up. So if it's an urban bird in the spring, summer, early fall, like August, before sharpshins are moving through, you're probably looking at a Cooper's hawk. So here in Las Vegas, I'm just assuming right now and moving forward to September, if I see one of the two here, it's going to be a coop. And of course, track the wing beat tempo on these birds. Faster than you can count, probably a Sharpie. We're not going to cover goshawks today. That's the third of the accipiters, but we just don't experience them enough in the Southwest to really talk about them. But let's talk about eagles. We've got golden eagles and we've got bald eagles in the Southwest. And on the left-hand side here, you can see this is a very cropped in photo, but this is going to be a golden eagle gliding overhead. And then on the right, this is one that was kind of soaring around, so kind of going in a more circular motion. Golden eagles are very long-tailed and small-headed and small-beaked. Like the sharp-shinned hawk, the tail kind of pinches in and gets a little bit more narrow where it meets the body. And on the right-hand side there, you have a juvenile bird with that clean white on the inner wings, and then that sort of clean base to the tail of white, bordering that dark. Even from a distance, these adults are going to have the noticeable golden nape, but for the most part, they're not going to have a completely golden cast. And when they're defending a territory or maintaining a territory, oftentimes these you'll get a pair maintaining a territory, and you can tell that they're acting cooperatively. Whereas bald eagles, you're only really gonna see them acting cooperatively if they are a nesting pair, and when they're a nesting pair, they're gonna have the white heads and the white tails, of course, in those dark bodies. That's a pretty recognizable bird. But when bald eagles are young, they can be pretty difficult to tell apart from golden eagles or potentially a vulture, depending on the distance and the conditions that you're viewing these birds in. But at all ages, these bald eagles have really large heads with large beaks, much larger than a golden eagle. And they're going to have relatively shorter tails than a golden eagle, and these long, almost plank-like broad wings. Comparing the two side by side here, a young golden eagle with a young bald eagle on the left. That bald eagle on the left, the underparts are a little bit more mottled. It has this kind of messier look. That head is going to project well beyond the body. And look at how much beak that bird has to it. It's got this giant beak on this really long, large head. The golden eagle on the right, again, longer tailed, comes to a pinched point, much smaller head, much smaller beak. And you're going to generally see them in different habitats. Golden eagles, you're going to get them in open desert and grasslands. They might go around water from time to time, but for the most part, bald eagles are going to be hanging out in a place with a lot of water, where they're going to hunt their favorite thing, fish. And if they can't find any large fish, they will hunt anything else. And that often includes ducks. They will happily go after ducks and water birds if they can't find their fish. You don't really see them sharing the same spaces in the Southwest. You get golden eagle in more places because there's more habitat that is favorable to golden eagles. But in some places, golden eagles can concentrate in high numbers, especially where food is abundant. So they're a lot more tolerant of one another, the bald eagles, when food is not scarce. Most of our bald eagles have departed the region. Some do breed, especially at reservoirs or along the Colorado River in the Southwest, and our golden eagles are breeding mostly around the cliffs of the region. Although I did hear from one of U.S. Fish and Wildlife's biologists in Nevada say that golden eagle numbers are down about 9% since 2014. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're not finding their favorite foods, which are black-tailed jackrabbit and cottontails. And those animals are not doing well because of drought and this novel disease called rabbit hemorrhagic disease, which has been affecting rabbits in all across North America for a couple of years and really affecting the things that prey on them. So if you've been outside in the Southwest for a while and you've noticed less rabbits around, um, it, it's probably mostly due to that rabbit hemorrhagic disease, which of course affects eagles that need that food to feed their young and feed themselves. So 9% reduction in golden eagles in the last 12 years or so. But let's move on to some other birds of prey. This might be a very familiar bird of prey depending on the areas you're visiting, especially in the wintertime. We've got lots of northern harriers that come through and are around our marshes, agricultural areas, areas with a lot of grasses where they can hunt rodents and small birds. And these birds are exceptionally long-winged and long-tailed. They're slender-bodied. They're also slender-winged. So everything about them is quite slight. Um, as they're gliding, usually over a agricultural area, grassy area, not usually over open desert necessarily, you're going to see them with their wings upward, kind of like a vulture, making that shallow dihedral, that shallow V shape, and they're very graceful as they're hunting. The red-shouldered hawk that I mentioned a couple slides ago, they usually hang out on one perch and they're just watching and waiting for something to come out in the open. They're on one end of the spectrum of hunting effort. They're kind of like the laziest, most patient ones. The harriers, on the other hand, they are actively hunting almost constantly, just kind of traipsing and coursing over the landscape. And regardless if they're a young bird, an adult female, or an adult male, you're always going to see this white rump. This is different from the Cooper's hawk, which has that white saddle. Harriers have a completely white rump. So if you see that white go all the way across the back of the bird where the back and the upper tail meet, you're probably looking at a northern harrier and not anything else. If you went to a place like Florida, you might get snail kites, which have white across the back of the tail like that. But most of the birds of prey in the Southwest are going to have that. There might be an exception out there. Can't remember if Harris's have white across the back. Something to look up. Moving on to other birds of prey. Osprey. This is going to be a cosmopolitan species found worldwide, found on 6 continents, not in Antarctica. These are fish specialists. They can actually move one of their toes around to the back to be able to make 4 corners of talons coming out. That's a great way to capture fish. They're extremely ridiculously long-winged birds. They're one of the farthest migrators of any bird of prey, up there with Swainson's hawks. Apparently, some of our ospreys in Canada go down into places like Argentina to also spend the winter months. And so they use those long wings for long migrations and also a lot of time over open water. So they have to be able to hunt over open water where they can't land without getting themselves into jeopardy. At all ages and age classes, they're going to be presenting as mostly black, gray, and white. And what stands out to me a lot of the time is this crooked winged appearance where it almost looks like they look like a squished letter M. The bird on the left there, that's a bird in a glide, and you can even see those crooked wings there. Whereas the one more in the center, this is a bird that's gliding, but thinking about diving on a fish. This is at Clark County Wetlands Park near Las Vegas, and that bird was about to dive, but you can see those crooked wings in both of those postures. So that's your osprey. Check around reservoirs or any places with large fish, and you might see some ospreys. Now we got to move on to some of my favorite birds. These are the birds we were looking for, especially when I was at the Florida Keys Hawk Watch. And we've got our ninja star shaped birds of prey. We'll cover so not all of the falcons well, but we'll get into some of the major ones. And here is a bird that at least everyone should be familiar with, at least by the name and its notoriety. This is a peregrine falcon. This is a medium-sized bird of prey. You can see a relatively long tail and relatively long winged. When the wing is completely outspread, that back trailing edge of the wing is going to be very straight and it's going to have this knife-like appearance. And those cutting knife-like wings are going to help them cut through the sky. These are the birds that can, when they're in a stoop, so working with gravity and they've got some momentum, they can turn themselves into a bullet and move at over 200 miles an hour. And I've seen them capture swallows and kill blue-winged teal on the wing that way and seen them do some really spectacular things that way. They're fairly broad-chested for a falcon. The prairie falcons are a lot slimmer, as we'll see in a moment, and they have a dark helmet. Um, Other falcons have some dark on their faces, but you'll see none of them really have that helmet like a peregrine falcon. The prairie falcon has less of a helmet and a little bit more mustache, as you can see with the two birds on the right-hand side. But even from a distance, you can pick out a prairie falcon, usually because of the really dark armpits at all ages and sexes. Those dark armpits are going to be very noticeable. They're kind of like dark struts holding up the wings. Technically, they're called axillaries, that area of the wing. These are our armpits. And they're usually going to be a paler brown than a juvenile peregrine falcon, which can appear kind of a darker brown. And they get more steely gray when they become adults, those peregrine falcons. Prairie falcons I get out in the desert, I get in the grasslands and steppes. You can get them east of the Rockies, but you can also get them just about anywhere in the desert, especially if there are large um, rocky outcroppings where they can breed. They like to be in a little shaded area. And they're small enough to be predators for things like great horned owls. Great horned owls will predate on them if they can find them at night. So they have to be a little hidden, these falcons. And speaking of prey, here's a bird of prey that is a predator, but also prey itself, because this is a very small bird of prey. This is one that is going to be very familiar to most of us. This is the American kestrel, our smallest falcon species in North America. We get them breeding here in Las Vegas, especially wherever you get the Mexican fan palms. They figured out how to nest in those, but you can find them in old woodpecker nest cavities or bird boxes on occasion. And look at how slim this bird is. It's got these really soft angles to where the wings uh, come together at the wrist and go back down to the bird's body. Long, slim tail. They have this buoyant, almost butterfly-like flight that is pretty unique amongst the birds of prey, and especially the other falcons. They don't really have this butterfly-like flight. But here's the American kestrel. Um, about the size of a uh, male sharp-shinned hawk. So those two birds, a male sharp-shinned hawk and a kestrel, are probably tied for our smallest diurnal birds of prey in North America. Of course, the screech owls, flammulated owls, elf owls. These are birds of prey that are nocturnal, that are smaller than a kestrel. These are our smallest diurnal birds of prey. And they can be confused sometimes with a small falcon that we don't see as much in the Southwest. They're only really down here from the end of September through sometime in April, but most of those merlins would have left. Some of them breed in the boreal forest of Canada and Alaska. Some of them will be in the upper prairie states. And here is a prairie morph of a merlin. This is a falcon that is about the length of a kestrel, but a lot heavier. And a great way to tell them apart from a kestrel in flight is that their flight is from A to B. It is fast and direct. They're not messing around. Sometimes I joke that they have heavy metal playing in their head all day long. They just are very fierce. They'll chase other birds of prey. I've seen them chase eagles and peregrine falcons and things that if they were caught, they could be easily killed by that bird of prey. But they're very confident and very ornery. Definitely bird eaters. Kestrels will eat birds too, but they're going after a lot of dragonflies and insects. But merlins are going after birds a little bit more. Those kestrels, again, they float a little bit as they're flying. They look very buoyant as they're moving around. They'll take little breaks between flapping, but a merlin is very direct and goes from A to B. Heavier bird, and a much different pattern than a kestrel. You can see here the tail of this merlin is going to have that terminal band that kind of reminds me of a red-shouldered hawk, that alternating pattern, which you're not really going to see as distinctly on some of those other falcons. When I was putting this presentation together, I thought initially I was going to cover a lot or all of the birds of prey. But what I decided is let's just focus on the ones that people are going to see most of the time in most places of the Southwest. And if there's time, I will cover some of the other ones like your common black hawk, zone-tailed hawk, gray hawk, rough-legged hawk, northern goshawk, Harris's hawk, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not going to be able to do that for the sake of time. But here are some of those birds that we did not cover that you can get in the Southwest, depending where you're at. The common blackcock, and this is a young one, they're not black until they're adult plumage. This one has that interesting checkerboard pattern to the bird. You can get them in cottonwood, gallery forest, in probably mostly the Tucson area, southeast Arizona, although they do get into Utah and New Mexico. I took this photo south of Albuquerque just a couple weeks ago. Zone-tailed hawks, you're going to find them more in like mid-elevation in the mountains, anywhere you get some oaks or some junipers. They're going to be in kind of hillier terrain. We get them up to about St. George, Zion National Park, but they're a lot more common in the Colorado Plateau area, Flagstaff all the way down through Arizona, where you're also getting more gray hawks, especially in low elevations, in wet areas, very similar to what you might get red-shouldered hawks in. Rough-legged hawk, this is a visitor that's coming from the Arctic where they breed. They're up in Alaska and Canada right now where they breed, or at least most of them are there. Some I'm sure are still on the way there. And they won't be back in our region until the wintertime. But when they do, they're usually going to be found in higher elevation. These are birds with like feathers that go all the way down their talons to be able to help them tolerate very cold places year round. So this is a cold tolerant buteo, a bird that I wish I had a little bit more time to get into, but not really a very southwestern species. So that's what we'll leave it at as far as the profile. And I'm doing awesome on time because I have just a few minutes left and just a couple more slides, and then we'll move into the chat and give that up to 30 minutes. Here's one of the best quotes I could find about birds of prey and identification. Hopefully you've learned a couple things, regardless of your experience level. But if you're going to learn anything or take anything away from this, it is that hawk identification isn't concerned with how things are. It is concerned with how they appear. And like all things in birding, you're collecting little puzzle pieces here and there, and you are coming up with an assessment, sometimes a gut feeling at the end of it. So where can you take some of these new skills and things that you already know about birds of prey? Again, even if you can't identify them, going out and watching birds of prey is just an amazing way to spend your time. And all across the West, we have mountain ranges that are great, especially in the fall, for watching migratory birds. And on the left, you have a map of the official hawk watch sites. In the Southwest, we have one in the Grand Canyon, we have one in New Mexico, and we have one in Northeast Nevada called the Go Shoots. And in all these places, you're going to pinch points in the topography where birds of prey are sort of funneled in to a place where observers are able to get pretty close looks and lots of looks, depending on the conditions that day or how long you're there, of birds of prey moving southbound. Going to hawk watches can be an amazing thing. You're around a lot of experienced people, so check out hawkwatch.org to look into that and see when and where those sites might be. But just a little bit of understanding about how these birds move can help you pick your own spot. And here in Las Vegas, where we live in this valley surrounded by mountain ranges, getting up into one of these mountain ranges that run north-south, that's the orientation where most of these birds are migrating. How about that? So you find a mountain range that runs north-south, you go at a time when the hawks are migrating, and you might be rewarded with birds of prey moving overhead. And there's some places in the Spring Mountains west of Las Vegas that, going out there in September, bring some water, your sense of adventure, but you get on a ridge line and you can get sharp-shinned hawks and Cooper's hawks and other types of birds that aren't birds of prey, all moving down these ridges. It can be a really exciting way to see migration. Other than that, get out into any of the habitats, and the habitats are going to dictate what you see. If you want to see red-shouldered hawk, go hang out near some riparian areas with cottonwoods. If you want to see some Swainson's hawks, go find some grasslands or some areas with just a couple scattered trees, and you may find those birds. So get into the appropriate habitat and really enjoy birds of prey this summer, get to know them, and then anticipate that there's going to be a movement starting in September and going into fall for more birds of prey coming and going throughout the seasons. So thank you for your attention. I'm about to move over to the chat. If you're interested in seeing the recording, because there's stuff in here and you just couldn't catch it all, I'm going to put the recording up on school.com. I have this online classroom. Making an account is really fast and easy. So if you just make that account, you can go into the classroom. I'm going to have a recording, and then I'm going to have a bunch of other things that I add to that. So please check that out. My website is completely not brand new, but I have spent a couple of days fixing it up. It's naturemind.org. Oops. Um, on that school classroom, you will be able to find message boards. So I created a message here to kind of start the conversation. So if there are any questions that you might have coming out of this webinar and you want to ask me directly, again, you can go into school. Signing up is free. Getting into that classroom is free. You can just start engaging, and I'd love to see what comes up. If you'd like me to do a part two, I'm open to doing a part two, but I want to know what people want to do. So you can take some of those questions there. And while you're there, you may also be interested to know what other courses I'm offering. One of them coming up is going to be a virtual one that's limited to 25 people. It starts on June 1st. And so you can go ahead and check that out in school, in my school classroom. And I'm going to put a mix of free things in there. I'm also going to put some things that are paid. So you pay and then you get access to it. And then we have multiple courses or webinars. And then I'm able to at least spend some of my time interacting with the students that way. So I've got this really fun one. You can learn more about the class by reaching out to me directly over email. You can also go on to naturemind.org. I have a much longer description there with the syllabus and the itinerary. This course is going to be more tailored towards birders that are really looking to get more skills, but especially I'm trying to get volunteers for Audubon chapters that want to up their game with natural history. And I'm also trying to find people that are field biologists that are looking to get a little bit more experience understanding birds so that it can help them with their career. So that's what I'm going for, but all are welcome to join. So all that said, thank you so much. Let's head on over to the chat. I am going to just start looking through here and just go one by one. Thank you so much. Um, if you're wanting to hop off, feel free to hop off at any time. I'm just going to start looking through. Okay, so Jax was able to clarify something for me, and thinking back to the goshawk, Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned hawk discussion where I said there's a split. Jax mentioned that the sharp-shinned is the only one left in the genus Accipiter, so the other ones would have been moved out into some other genus that are probably adjacent to the sharp-shinned hawk. So this is one of the cool things about um, genetic analysis, allowing us to look at birds that We're thought to be related based off of appearance or habit, and actually able to look at these birds and realize that they might be different, but a lot of times they're examples of convergent evolution where traits are favored for certain lifestyles. Kristen asks, sorry to get into the weeds a little bit, but have the 2014 numbers from that event gone down or up since then? I think this is relating to golden eagles. Um, the numbers are projected to continue to go down with golden eagles, unfortunately. A combination of drought and potentially with golden eagles, but definitely with peregrine falcons. There's also avian flu that is really affecting these birds. So there's habitat loss, there's loss of food for the golden eagles. Their primary food sources in Nevada, 75% of their diet being just two species of animals, the black-tailed jackrabbit and the cottontail. We've lost a lot of those for the golden eagles. So they're long-lived birds, but if you start to lose some of your adults, your breeding adults, with no younger ones coming up behind them to eventually be of breeding age, well, now you get yourself into a bit of an issue. That being said, bird of prey reintroduction programs have been very successful in the past coming out of the DDT era. So, even though sometimes it can be a little grim, do know that these programs have been done before, and there might be ways to reestablish populations with some movement of wild birds, but also rearing of some birds in captivity. So it has happened before. Kristen had to sign off. Thank you. Lynn, thank you for the presentation. Yes, Arizona, Harris's hawk. Yeah, I didn't get into a profile of Harris's hawk, and once you get to about Prescott, like center of the state and down, you do get a lot more Harris's hawk. This is a bird that is kind of like a boodio, but also kind of like an accipiter, like a Cooper's hawk. Like imagine a red-shouldered hawk and a Cooper's hawk had a really big child, and that child worked with a family group to chase down things like rabbits as a group. They're definitely quite unique, a fairly large bird of prey. And yeah, that my reason was honestly is I didn't have any great photos of them, is one of them. But also just for the sake of time, I wanted to cover the ones that were most widespread, but couldn't get into some of your many amazing Arizona specialties. Allison, thank you. I appreciate that you wanted to see or that you like the silhouette slides. And I may, if there's demand for it in the school, I may, create like a PDF or something like that that is silhouettes for people to be able to use. Franklin asks, for birds of prey, do you recommend putting some emphasis on their calls, or should we focus mostly on silhouettes and field marks? Great question, Franklin, and I'm so glad you can make it. The Yes, if you hear a bird of prey vocalizing, almost always you can narrow that species down to one species based off of the sounds that it's making. Birds of prey typically aren't very they don't have songs, we'll say, but they will make vocalizations, especially when they are nesting, breeding, raising young. When they're on territory, they can be especially vocal. So if you are familiar with the vocalizations, then yes, you can certainly identify those species. And not only identify those species, but oftentimes be able to interpret what they're up to. For example, golden eagles might only be vocal when they're around a cliff where there are eggs or a young bird or a mate. And oftentimes you can find golden eagles that way if you know what to listen for. So go into Sibley, go into Merlin, and give the the sound recordings some listening to because all these birds are identifiable by sound. Thank you, Luana. It's good to see you on here too. I appreciate that. Thank you, Jennifer. Alex Farrell, YouTube channels, or it's good to see you too here, Alex. YouTube channels or videos you would recommend to study wing beat patterns and rhythm. Ooh, Uh, none come to mind, but I'm sure there's some really amazing ones to watch birds in flight. Although you'd have to find somebody really dedicated with a lot of ability to put footage that they probably got into something that's very niche. So I don't know. But YouTube has just about everything these days, I think. Jax, we need a part two that focuses on Southeast Arizona. Yeah, we sure do. Southeast Arizona is just a fabulous place to go looking for birds and reptiles, mammals, plants, you name it. But they have gray hawks, common black hawks, zone-tailed hawks, and Harris's hawks that we don't really get in some of the um, other areas of the Southwest. So thank you, Jax. You give me something to think about. I got to get down there and get some more photos of those birds because I like to have presentations with my photos. So it's not that far away from Vegas where I live. Allison, thank you so much. Lynn, thank you. Um, wow, you're commenting that a Harris's hawk was going after a cat on the roof. I'm not surprised. Harris's hawks are pretty amazing birds of prey. Alex Rubens, good to see you, Alex. It's so nice to see a lot of my friends from different parts of life all tuning in. Thank you for the support. Alex, great presentation. What is the craziest hawk behavior you think you've ever witnessed? I would say that with birds of prey, the it's not a hawk that comes to mind. It's a peregrine falcon. This is at the Florida Keys Hawk Watch 2014. And I remember where I was. I was standing on the platform looking north, and I'm watching this peregrine falcon at a distance, and then all of a sudden these blue-winged teals come in, about 20 of them, and they start flying around just beyond the deck where we're observing. And they're just kind of wielding around, and I'm watching the blue-winged teals with my binoculars, tracking them. And through the binocular view, this peregrine falcon comes out of nowhere and grabs one of the teal, kills the teal instantly, and then the teal being very heavy, the peregrine falcon now with this dead duck that is probably heavier than the falcon is now struggling to get over to a perch. And before it can make any sort of headway, another peregrine falcon comes in from behind, then comes in below the dead duck, and the peregrine falcon grabs onto the duck, and the two birds are doing this tug of war, and the peregrine falcon from below is like yanking on the bird flying upside down, and they're pulling back and forth. And I can't remember which one got away with it, but it was a tough day to be a blue-winged teal. That is for sure. Yeah, it's pretty metal. I'm sure if I thought about it a little bit more, I could come up with some, but anytime you're seeing a bird of prey stoop from a very high elevation and just completely just turn itself into a bullet and move through the air, I think it's one of nature's spectacles, even if it's something like a red-tailed hawk or a peregrine falcon that, can be quite common. Pretty amazing to see. Yeah. So I don't think I've missed anything. Um, yeah, everyone, unless there are more questions, I'm gonna call it a night and enjoy the last little bit of daylight that's out there. Might look around for a kestrel or red-tailed hawk near the golf course down the street. But please let me know what you want to see next, and I hope to do another one. Jack.